everyone, welcome to our final live story for 2022 on LifeStories Worldwide. We send out stories on social media all over the world and from all over the world. Stories of challenges, stories where people have had all sorts of problems and hurt, rejection, but have come through and have stories of fulfillment, happiness, and joy. If you want to contact us, you can contact us through our hotline +44 794 355 0287, or you can also contact us through our website, lifestoriesworldwide.com, where you find all sorts of information to help you. You'll find a Life Stories app that you can download from Apple or Android. Also a Gideon's Bible app that you can use for your own personal use, which will help you. So as I said, we bring you stories from all over the world. And today we have two guests. We have a husband and wife. We have Chris and Denise Arthey from Guildford in Surrey. They have an amazing story. In 2008, they were on an assignment working in Texas. Chris was an engineer, Denise a teacher, and they were on a motorcycle trip in Texas. And they will share with you the things that happened, which has changed the course of their life. And so it's a real pleasure to welcome them, and also welcome all our guests who are watching, people in Ukraine, and the people on Torch who trust, who are listening. We can't watch us, but many, many people, we thank you for being with us. But I hand over now to Chris and Denise, who are going to share their story. Thank you, Chris and Denise.
Well, thank you, Alan, for the invitation and for that introduction. Are you doing okay? Yeah, Denise and I are going to share the talking this evening, and you'll soon find out that Denise is a very special person indeed. Shortly after our accident, which was in 2008, we celebrated our 30th wedding anniversary. So we've now been married for over 44 years. As we recovered, we spent many hours together in hospital and in doctors' waiting rooms, and in therapy and at home doing exercises and recovering. And we found out that actually we're still best friends. And from my perspective, there's no one else I'd rather spend my time with. We're really thankful that despite what happened to us, we still have each other. But enough of the introductions. What did happen to these two people? Well, let's start by talking about motorcycling. I love motorcycles. I was on a motorcycle on my 16th birthday, and I've owned and ridden bikes of various sizes over the years since. And one of my lifetime ambitions has always been to ride motorcycle road trips in the USA. And then in 2007, when my employer asked if I would take a work assignment in Texas, this was my big chance. So Denise and I grabbed this opportunity with both hands. We moved to Texas at the end of 2007. And I think we've got another photo coming up in a moment. Yes, this is the machine that we crashed. It's a Harley-Davidson FLHR Road King 2008. It's got their 96 cubic inch, 1600cc engine, 6 forward gears, belt drive. Now, it's at this point that Denise kicks me under the table and says, Chris, people are really not, well, most people are really not that interested in the motorbike. So I'll stop talking about the technical beauty of this machine, and suffice it to say that it was just a marvelous touring motorcycle, and we were living the dream. This picture was taken the evening before the accident. We were exploring the next day down the Gulf Coast towards the Mexico border and the Rio Grande, and our destination was Corpus Christi. So we were on this machine, and it was just after a break for lunch, 2:30 p.m. on a weekday, a lovely May afternoon, a dry, straight two-laner, down towards Corpus Christi, and then bam, everything changed. So if we could take the photograph off now. Yes, fortunately, we don't have any memory of what happened to us. But there was a reconstruction about a year later in a Texas courtroom. And apparently it went something like this. I was riding the Harley-Davidson. Denise was on the pillion. We were doing 55 miles an hour. The speed limit was 70. And I remember in the States, we're on the right-hand side of the road. A young driver in a Ford F-150 truck, which is a big truck, came up behind us. 55 wasn't fast enough for him. So he overtook us and he just finished overtaking. So now I'm looking at the back of this F-150 truck. The truck driver noticed that there was a red SUV, a red car, coming at him at high speed on the wrong side of the road. So he thinks, wow, is he asleep at the wheel? Is he on the phone? Is he going to get back into his own lane? No, he's not. So at the last moment, the truck driver just drove off the road. Now I can see the red SUV, which is coming at me at over 80 miles an hour. I'm doing 55. So we've got a closing speed of over 135 miles an hour. And things are happening at 60 meters a second, and he hit us virtually head on. The next vehicle in line behind us was a white Chevrolet Avalanche, driven by a man. His wife was with him in the cab, and they saw this explosion of motorcycle parts and two bodies flying through the air like rag dolls. The red vehicle went back on the correct side of the road. The white truck driver was slowing down for the accident. Then the red vehicle came out and hit him and knocked the white truck about 20 meters off the road, almost killed the driver and seriously injured his wife.
He's coming. Jesus is coming. I can't wait to hear the trumpet call. He's coming. Jesus is coming. And when he comes, we'll crown him Lord of all. And when he comes, we'll crown him Lord of all.
So the next time you're driving at about 55 miles an hour on a straight road and there's traffic coming at high speed in the other direction, just think for a moment, what would it be like if one of those vehicles jumped across the road unexpectedly and hit you head on? Then imagine what it would be like if you were on a motorcycle. It turned out that the driver of the red vehicle was over 3 times the drink drive limit. They have the same drink drive limit in America as they do over here. It's 80 milligrams per 100 milliliters. They call it 0.08%, but he was well over the 80. In fact, he was at 250, which is the equivalent of between 2.5 and 3 bottles of wine, or just over half a litre of whiskey. Just for further context, he was at 250. 350 is the equivalent of a general anaesthetic in hospital. So he was extremely drunk. Now, at this point in the story, I left planet Earth to go and live somewhere else for quite some time. So I'll let Denise take up the story.
Right, you're going to have to forgive me because I'm going to imagine that I'm just talking to a class of 6 and 7-year-olds, and then I'll relax. The truck driver said that Chris would have had less than half a second to react. We were both terribly injured, as you can imagine. We were flown in his and hers helicopters to the nearest trauma hospital at Corpus Christi. We both had severely crushed left legs. Mine had to be amputated straight away. We both had broken left arms and hands. My arm was degloved. I lost a lot of skin. We both had concussion, although Chris's was a lot worse. And because Chris was at the front of the bike, he had punctured lung, broken ribs, and a ruptured spleen. So Chris was in ICU for over 2 weeks, a lot of that time in a medically induced coma. And I was in ICU for less than a week. So just imagine I'm in a bed in the hospital and I'm looking down at flat bedclothes where my left leg should be. I've got a huge plaster cast on my left arm. I can't move. I'm in extreme pain. I know Chris is more severely injured. I just don't know how badly. And we often describe it as a nightmare that you wake up to. Usually you have a nightmare and you wake up and whew, it was a bad dream. But this was the scenario that we woke up to every day. Chris, in the very early days, was fighting for his life because he was on a ventilator. And as I said, he was in a coma and they were trying to save his left leg. But after 10 days, Ben, our eldest son, who'd flown out, and I signed for his amputation. The night before, I lay awake, praying. I was concerned, would Chris actually make it in his weak state through an operation? And if he did make it, would he agree to the fact that we'd signed for the amputation? But the amputation marked the start of Chris's recovery. As soon as Chris's employer heard the news, they were amazing. The manager cleared for our 3 youngsters to fly out to the States. We have 2 sons and a daughter. Ben at the time was 25, Tom was 22, and Miriam was 18 and in her first year at university. And for them, it was a 10-hour flight, but not knowing how many parents they would have when they arrived at the other end. The company organised, paid for a hotel, hire car, mobile phone, even gave them spending money. And the message was, just stay until your parents are out of danger. After a month, we were well enough to move to a rehabilitation hospital near Houston, where we lived. Can we have the next photo, please? We did lots of therapy. So here we are, sharing an exercise table. You can see the weights on our good legs. They have to be really strong, those legs, for when you start to walk with a prosthetic. We both had further arm surgery, but we were both home 2 months after the crash, so about mid-July. Can we have the next slide, please?
And just go on to the next picture.
Yeah, just getting that.
Okay.
Yeah. And this should show us when we both got home, and obviously we were in wheelchairs.
So it's lost the sequence a little bit. Just give me a moment. Here we go. Sorry about that.
It's okay. Yes.
That's good.
Yes, you can see my left arm still quite red. I had a skin graft on that arm. Chris has also had some work done on his fingers and his elbow. To get the skin that we needed for both our stumps and my arm, we have donor sites on our right thighs where they took the skin. And we found actually the donor sites were the thing that took the longest to heal. Okay, thank you for the photo. We continued with outpatient therapy, but the 4-month mark was really exciting because we got our first prosthetic legs, but then you have to learn to walk again. When Chris could walk 50 meters with a stick, his manager allowed him to go back to work part-time. Outpatient therapy actually lasted till the 9-month mark. And then we did a further year of chiropractic therapy for our spines because we damaged them because we landed on our heads.
He's coming. Jesus is
Life Stories.
Okay, so that's a quick summary of what happened to us. But the important question is, well, what does this mean for me? Or what can we learn from it? Well, we learned quite a lot. The first thing we learned is that miracles still happen. we had an email from one of the state troopers who was first on the scene of the accident, and he found out sometime later that we'd survived and managed to get our email address. And in his email, he said, I can't believe it that you survived that accident. And obviously he'd seen a lot of road traffic accidents. And his words were, it's just a miracle that you're still here. So that's one thing. Another thing is an obvious one, and that is motor vehicles can be lethal weapons. Now, the roads in the UK amongst the safest in the world. They're actually about twice as safe as they are in Texas. But and that's per mile traveled, and they drive a lot of miles in Texas. But even so, in the UK, we have about 1,800 road deaths a year, and then there are all the injuries. So that's about 5 people dying every day on our roads. And you think, well, if that was anything else, then people would have to do something about it. But because it's just road accidents and they don't really sell newspapers, it seems to be accepted as part of life. So what we would say is that, driving these lethal weapons, it must take our full attention with no distractions, no mobile phones. You shouldn't be driving if you're unfit to do so, drink or drugs, the obvious stuff. But the consequences of getting this wrong are potentially lethal. And sort of linked to that, there's another lesson on intervention. If we see something crazy happening, it's our responsibility to say something, to intervene. Our drunk driver was trying to drive back home after having been on a fishing trip. So people had been with him all morning on the boat while he was drinking heavily. They would have seen him when he got back to the dock, saw him getting into his car. They probably waved goodbye to him as he weaved off down the road. We heard in the courtroom that witnesses had seen him weaving across Highway 35 for several miles. And here he is in front of an 18-wheeler and, he's just about made it back. Somebody's going to get killed or seriously injured here soon. But nobody did anything. Nobody said anything. There was no intervention. And it left us with the question, well, why is that so difficult? Why don't we intervene when we see things like this happening? Well, we think the answer is found in the Old Testament. In Proverbs 29, verse 25, it says, fear of man will prove to be a trap. And it's true. We see something daft going on and we're frightened. We're frightened of what people might think or what they might say or what they might do. So we keep our opinions to ourselves. Most of the time we get lucky, situation resolves, nobody gets hurt. But if we carry on not intervening, eventually there will be a bullet in the chamber and the accident will happen. And as in our case, lives will be changed forever. So one thing we've learned and we would share with you is that if you see something daft going on, say something. You don't have to be rude about it. Just, is this really a good idea? Whether it's driving or somebody using an unsecured ladder, whatever it is, please, and we're speaking to ourselves as well here, make an effort to say something and stop an accident happening. Okay, we have another photograph to show. And there are 2 reasons for showing this photo. One is that I like to brag. Before the accident, I was a marathon runner, running several international marathons. And this picture was actually the Austin Half Marathon. Just a few weeks before the accident, I took an age group 5th. So you can see I like to brag. But the other reason for showing the picture is that being physically fit can not only give you life, in my case, if you enjoy sports, but it can also save your life. We'll take the photo away now. The medics, both in Corpus Christi and back in the rehab hospital in Houston, said that the reason we survived, and certainly the reason for our rapid recovery, was because we were in good physical condition before the accident happened. Now, I understand that endurance athletics is not everyone's cup of tea, but it is worth thinking about it. If you do enough to just raise your level of physical capacity, it can make a huge difference when bad things happen, because fit people are harder to kill.
We also learnt that things are much better if you have a good support structure, good friends around you. In the New Testament, in Galatians 6, verse 2, it talks about carrying each other's burdens, because that's what Jesus wants us to do. And obviously, as Christians, we were part of churches, and it's like having a family wherever you go, because as news broke of the accident, 4 to 5 carloads from the US church were traveling down to Corpus Christi. Our church back in England had arranged flights for our youngsters, and they drove them to the airport. Probably more surprising, our American next door neighbours, and we'd only been in the house for 5 months, they met our 3 youngsters and drove them to Corpus Christi. That is a 4-hour drive. The pastor of our American church, he came down to Corpus Christi every week. He made 4 long trips and stayed overnight. I got out of hospital before Chris eventually, and I'd been walking with a neighbour and a friend, and this friend was an ex-nurse, and she said, just don't worry, you'll be in a wheelchair, you'll be on your own, but I will stay with you in the house.
He's coming. Jesus is coming. I can't wait to hear the trumpet call. He's coming. Jesus is coming. And when he comes, we'll cry.